So I am Rosemary Ventura. I am the Director of Nursing Informatics for NY-Presbyterian.
And I'm Dr. Cheryl Parker. I'm the Chief Nursing Informatics Officer for PatientSafe Solution. I am faculty at Rutgers, I am faculty at Walden, and I'm on the Board of Directors of the Emergency Nurse Association, and a fellow at HIMSS. Is that enough?
I didn't say all that.
Well, preceptor.
That's right. So we just wanted to disclose everything. So in any event, why don't we get started? So today, we really want to take you through the journey of the partnership that we've had from the vendor side and the client side to building our mobility solution at NY-Presbyterian. This, what we'll take you through today, has been a long journey. It's actually close to almost 11 years at this point. So it's not something that happens overnight, but what we're going to really show you is, number one, why did we do this? Why are we doing this? It's so important. I know you've heard this multiple times, over and over, especially here. It's all about mobility. Where do we want our clinicians to be? We want our nurses to be at the bedside. So it's a lot of hard work. We'll take you through what some of those lessons learned have been for us because, again, it's been a multi-phased sort of project. But at the end of the day, we know it's the right thing to do to build one solution for positive patient identification, clinical documentation, and secured communication. You're going to learn a lot today. I hope you really do. Part of what we want to take you through is the rationale, again, of why we're doing this. And I really want to focus on some of these verbs. It's not really just about the modules, because you have to do that with every single module. You got to think about why you're going to implement something. So although I have here the rationale for doing, let's say, for example, clinical documentation, it's the rationale for doing all of this work. Because again, it requires work on so many sides of the operations, of the IT side. I mean, it's a multifaceted project. You can't do it alone. We're going to describe some of the obstacles. And actually, I should have taken out the word potential because it is there. It may be an obstacle, right? And I'm going to tell you everything. You don't have to guess it. I'm going to give you all the lessons learned that we, at least on our journey, have learned. So you can take that back and think about these things when you're sort of looking at your mobility strategy. So we're going to identify 2 positive patient outcomes. I think what you're going to see is that we, although some of our solutions have been implemented fairly recently in terms of that overall plan, we've seen tremendous improvements in a lot of our workflows. So we know that the effort was worth it, because at the end of the day, we all ask ourselves, why are we putting ourselves through this? Why do we come to work every day? Especially as a nursing informaticist, you're going to see, again, why we actually have done this, especially using the mobile technology at the point of care. What benefits have we already seen almost starting day 1 after the implementation? And then we're going to actually identify risks. Again, with every project, I'm assuming you guys are going through that risk analysis, pros and cons. We're going to help you through some of those things. I know you've seen this slide many times, so we all agree that it's here. We're going to take you through some of these details using the methodology of the steps. But at the end of the day, we'll go through each one of these points on the right-hand side as we discuss the implementation and the modules. So who are NY-Presbyterian? NY-Presbyterian is quite a large organization. We have 6 campuses in Manhattan proper, if you will. We have over 2,600 beds throughout those campuses, and we continue to grow. Within the last 2 years, we've actually incorporated 3 regional hospitals, and we're on the verge of incorporating another one. We have about 22,000 employees at NY-Presbyterian. We have, very importantly, what I want to give you the message today is we have close to 6,000 nurses. So as I'm describing this solution, we needed to make sure that it would work for all of those nurses in all of their clinical settings. This wasn't just for a handful of cardiologists, cardiology NPs. This had to be a solution that can work across the house. So here's a picture of our journey. One thing that's not here, and I'm sure PSS wouldn't mind me mentioning it, was that it actually started in 2008 when they sort of took over IntelliDot. We had actually implemented that solution first. And now that I think about it, we were sort of cutting edge already there because it was mobile. We had the option of implementing the barcode scanning system from our EMR vendor, and we chose not to. Good or bad, it was a decision we made and we stuck by it. Was everything perfect day one? Absolutely not. But it really positioned us well to go into the future in terms of mobility. So maybe we fell into it by accident, who knows, but I'll take it at this point. So what I really want to focus on in terms of our, this particular slide and our journey, again, is that it's been sort of phased. This was not a big bang effort. This is not something, at least at an organization our size, that we could do just day one, turn on the lights. So it was very strategic in terms of looking at each of those facilities and the work that needed to be done to implement them. And then honestly, you gotta think about the different modules. So we didn't implement everything day one. PSS has a number of modules, and I'll take you through what we chose to do in terms of the implementation strategy. So we started kind of simple in 2011 at Westchester. That's the first item that you see there. Westchester is a psychiatric hospital. And let me tell you, they practice from a med admin perspective. They have a nurse still in the med room, and the patients come to the nurse. So is it the most mobile type of environment? Not really, but the reason why we chose it was because it was the start. Can we actually implement this? What does it take from an infrastructure perspective and from an operations perspective to sort of start that out and get it done? So started there, then we rolled over in the following year in 2011 to our Allen Pavilion. And the Allen Pavilion, what's unique there is that was the first time that we added, from a layer of medication administration, we now added the infant care module. And this we did sort of very quickly because we understood that from a workflow perspective, the nurses needed that. We might as well have done it if they could handle it together. So it wasn't that extraordinary in terms of a lot more work, so we added them together. And Cornell is one of our larger campuses. I'm sure you've heard of Weill Cornell Medical Center. It's very big. It's about 600 beds. This took some time. And what I do want to highlight and be very honest with you is that it took years sort of to get from that Allen Pavilion over to Cornell for many reasons. One being that we needed the leadership buy-in. Although we said, the Allen is so successful, we're seeing, medication barcode scanning is decreasing errors, so on and so forth. Even within your own culture, you got to think about when people say, well, within my campus, I'm so much more complicated. I'm 3 times the size. I have critical care here. I have like this burn center, which we didn't have at the Allen Pavilion. So it took us a lot of planning, hand-holding, and those sorts of things to get over to Cornell. But we were pretty successful, and then we were able to go right over to our Columbia campus. What I do want to highlight is that in 2014, our Columbia campus became the first campus that we actually implemented the specimen collection component of this. And you talk about culture change and bringing mobility together. This was actually the first time that we introduced PSS to a department outside of nursing. Because think about it, who's collecting the specimens? It's the phlebotomist. Sometimes they can be challenging. I don't know about phlebotomists across the country, but they know what they know. They're very good at it, and they are very time sensitive. It's like our work, I'm on to the next patient. I couldn't draw your blood. I need to keep it moving. And so what really, one of the benefits, and we'll talk about it when I go through that, has been the communication with that department here. So implemented at Columbia, we did a small pilot because it is fairly large. We wanted to make sure that it went well. And then that went fine. We implemented at the our children's hospital, CHONI, that you see here. That was also very interesting, especially when you talk about culture with nurses. This particular area, and we'll take you through how we're going to device consolidation, these nurses in particular were very tied to their means of communication, I'll put it that way. So although they had to carry 2 devices, understanding that they needed to do the barcoding, their primary savior of life, if you will, was the other device. So when you talk about how to get them merged and bringing this all together, you got to look at some of those functionalities that are key to these populations that in their minds are lifesavers. And so moving along on our journey, we implemented back to the Allen Pavilion, did specimen collection, circled back, and then we did one of our most exciting projects with PSS, which is communications. Because at the end of the day, right, we want one device that we have to use in terms of basic calling, because you have an opportunity to give the nurse something they're going to carry because they need to do their jobs. And part of the key to their job is talking to people, reaching out to the doctors, reaching out to other folks. So we're very excited to share with you some of those, that journey. So this is kind of where, and I'm embarrassed to sort of say, but maybe not, we're still here. So although we've been on the journey for 11 years, we still haven't gotten to one device, but we are going to get there. Definitely. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl, and she's going to talk about our med admin.
So let's talk a little bit about improving medication workflow. How many of you all are doing barcoded medication administration? Okay, so most of you. Is it an exciting topic anymore? Maybe yes, maybe no. Let me show you some numbers. So one of the things that we did in this project that was really incredible was very tight dosing integration between the EMR product and the mobility solution. Okay? So what they documented at the bedside with mobility solution went back to the core EMR. This bidirectional workflow was really a thing that really helped everybody, because it kind of really cut down on the need for pushing around carts just to carry a computer. How many of your nurses love pushing around things just to get to a computer? Most of them aren't so happy with that. So it was really a collaborative effort, and you're going to hear us repeat that over and over again today. It's not just about IT. How many of y'all are IT folks? I love you guys. But sometimes you're stubborn. But then again, so are nurses, aren't we? Anybody believe that? Oh, look at the heads go up and down. Yeah, we kind of are. But the reality is, it takes all of us in today's environment to make these things work. These are some of the numbers. If you just look at the med admin study, and you probably have seen this study before. This is David Bates' classic study about 5 rights and why barcoding medication is so important. I mean, think about it. If you were a patient, or if your loved one was a patient, and you had a choice between 2 facilities to take them, would you take them to the one that was using barcode medication administration, or one who was still on paper? Vote. How many people would take them to the one that had barcode medication administration? Because I know I would.
Oh, yeah.
That would be a real drop dead for me now. Maybe not 5 years ago, but it certainly would be today, because it truly does reduce error. And as a nurse, and I have been, I'll tell you, this summer will be my 39th year as a registered nurse. And I always thought I provided very safe care. I, to my knowledge, never made a medication error. But what does this data tell me? This data tells me I made some medication errors that I just didn't know about. And that was an eye-opener for me. because I thought my practice was safe, but I had to have made errors that I didn't realize. Since we have implemented at NYP, we have done over 22 million med passes. And guess what? We did it using consumer grade products. Anybody want to be shocked at that one? So really, I'm going to challenge you guys. If you do not have a smartphone, would you please raise your hand? Look around.
No one's going to admit to that.
No one's going to admit to that at this point. How many of you, if your smartphone gets more than 10 feet away from you, do you start getting shaky?
Oh, yeah.
How many of you have turned around and driven home because you forgot your smartphone? Why? Why do you do it? Because it's everything. I don't know what I'm doing if I don't have my smartphone, right? But think about what we're doing to clinicians. They're just like you. They have their smartphones. But what happens when they get to the hospital? We tell them to lock it up, and we give them 1980s technology. Would you buy that? I mean, I don't want to use 1980s technology. So by giving them devices that were mobile, that they weren't having to push, that was right there, the scan compliance rate really went up. And barcode scanning is no good if we're skipping by it. It only works if we actually use it. So, are you doing specimen collection or am I?
Yes.
You are.
I'm up
I'm
again.
going to turn it back to her for a minute.
So building on some of these key sorts of clinical workflows, another opportunity that we had to use this technology again was with specimen collection. And I don't know if my colleague Steve is here, but he spoke about this morning, what a difference it makes in terms of interdepartmental communication. So you would think, this slide actually shows that after probably 15 years of CPOE, and doing, that sort of process, clinical documentation, that we would have had these things solved. But at the end of the day, we were still dealing with some of these issues here that really led us to this implementation. So unable to determine from the EMR if the specimen had been collected. I don't know if any of you still have those challenges, but even with the laboratory system completely integrated and our EMR, we still could not fix this until we actually implemented this mobile solution. We needed a way for the phlebotomist to just say, I could not get this specimen. It's like you can't understand why those things are so difficult in the acute care setting. But I'm going to tell you why. Because it required that phlebotomist to have to find the nurse to say, I was not able to get this. This solution actually allowed us to improve communication between those two departments in a process that's so key from a patient perspective. Who wants to be stuck twice? The other thing that this did was duplicate orders. So if a physician or provider sees that a lab hasn't been collected, naturally, what do you think the solution is? You got to put in another order. Obviously, somebody doesn't understand that I want this collected. I'll just add another one. So what this allowed us to really do was drive down duplicate orders. And then again, the other thing that we were still dealing with was the ability to flag it or to flag to a person when the status of an order had changed. Because our clinicians were not mobile, they were tied to the desktop. What do you think happens? When the phlebotomist is saying, I couldn't get this, or they cancel an order, the doctor's not in front of the computer. They didn't have that sort of mobile technology yet. So we were still grappling with that before we implemented this. So where did we see the improvements? And these are some of the things that we saw absolutely day one, is real-time collection and labels at the bedside. What I failed to mention that we also had, we had labels everywhere. We had them because the minute you put them in, depending on what the collection time is, it started spitting out the labels on the units. Someone was supposed to pick them up and put them in the charts and you know the whole deal, but that didn't happen. This actually brought that to a halt because you're not printing any label until you're ready to get the specimen. You're there at the bedside doing that new process. So immediately we saw improvements on this. The other thing that was truly important for us and really revolutionized thing was when I go back to the missed reasons. What this solution now allows you to do is while the phlebotomist is right there in the room, they can actually say, I could not collect this. They have a reasons list. That gets communicated immediately to the nurse who's also carrying around the device. And very importantly, it goes back into our EMR. So now finally the doctors could see that something was not collected. They didn't have to actually order another lab. So in terms of our compliance, I don't know about you guys, but prior to our implementation, what our nurses had to do, even our phlebotomists, when they got the specimen, they had to walk that specimen over to another computer on the unit that basically all it had was a tethered scanner and access to the lab system. So you get the specimen, go over to that computer, scan the specimen to say, I now have collected this specimen. Because in New York State, it's a requirement. You have to say who collected it, the time it was collected. We were at a 23% compliance with this process. The minute that we implemented this solution, our compliance went up to 95%. Other outcomes that we saw for improvement in specimen collection is positive patient identification. And as nurses, I have to tell you that our nursing staff sort of didn't understand that at the beginning. They were like, oh, you know, we do that today. We check the patient's ID. This actually makes you check the patient's ID. This was actually the one project that I can say, and when I've done it in the past 2 years, that was truly patient safety. You show the nurse that the minute you scan this barcode and there's a problem, they're going to be prompted to say, you know what, maybe this isn't the right patient. So absolutely ties right back to our patient safety initiatives. We had regulatory compliance. You already saw that in the previous slide. We finally had a place where we're doing more in terms of our HIPAA compliance. Again, we had those labels everywhere. We were keeping specimen little cups at the bedside with labels. This really eliminated all of that. We had a reduction in mislabeling of specimens, because think about it. Again, they're all in a pile. You pick one up. Hopefully that's the right one. You go to the bedside, check the patient. Okay. But we did have a large problem with mislabeled specimens. We also were impacting the operations of the lab. Because think about it, if the nursing staff was not using the right label because maybe it was misplaced, they were using the downtime labels. So in the laboratory, they had to relabel all of those specimens, making them less efficient. We had accuracy finally around turnaround time for collections because we were getting it real time. Of course, we saw improvement in terms of what is really happening on the unit. From the time something is ordered, you know, lab loves this stuff. They track every point in this process. And the minute they finally felt relief in terms of, I can tell my organization, this is real data that I can use, because it's finally accurate. Before, some of those pieces were missing, so we were sort of guesstimating in terms of our lab turnaround times. And anyway, the biggest thing too was the immediate notifications to the providers and to our nursing staff. I think that has been part of more of our biggest improvement. So since we've implemented this solution, we've had 4,139,068 specimens drawn in all clinical settings, from neonatal all the way up to geriatric, psychiatry, everything. So it's truly been revolutionary, not just for the nursing staff, but for our phlebotomy. So again, from an operations, and this is where the IT people's ears will perk up, because now you're managing sort of one device for this process. We're doing it for med admin, and we're also using it for specimen collection. So all you're doing and sort of providing support for is one device in terms of maintenance and contracting. The devices are not cheap. They're around $600 to $900, but at the end of the day, you'll see the savings in some of those other areas, such as your maintenance contracts. What you see in the second bullet here are some of the data that we found in the literature. So what did the VA find when they sort of looked at what was happening with these processes? They found patient misidentification events accounted for 73% of their 253 adverse events. You start putting that information in front of nurses and they start to understand because it's evidence-based. A lot of the times, many of our initiatives, we just talk about them to say this is the right thing to do, and in our gut we know that it is the right thing to do. But when you give them actual data and you put it this way, they really start to understand and incorporate it into their professional practice. It takes it to another level. And I think this slide, we're going to look at this a little more because we sort of are in the beginning phases of really looking at our outcomes. So right now, I can't immediately tie this implementation. We'll figure this out, maybe with the help of Vicky there. We'll do some analytics and some studies to tie this to decreased med errors and decreased errors around the specimen collection process. We have seen, according to our lab, like I told you again, they study this information very, very closely. We've seen a reduction in duplicate lab tests by 20%. What does that essentially mean? Savings in terms of the patient getting stuck and savings in terms of cost. 20% as soon as we implemented this. On average, we actually got this from them, a single misidentified specimen costs around $712. You start thinking about magnifying that, especially at an organization this size, that becomes a lot of money added to your bottom line. We saw an increase in compliance. You saw a little bit of this in my previous slide of from 30% to sort of 98% with our regulatory requirements. And to be honest with you, I don't know how we were sort of getting away with it, to be honest with you, but we're there now. Very important, I think, for everybody in this room is now that we have these foundational modules implemented, what are we doing to get our nurses from to one consolidated platform? This is where it becomes very exciting, and it's really been sort of within the past year that we're finally getting to the communications. I have to tell you, we have about 45 million data points that have been exchanged between this solution and our EMR, which is truly revolutionary. We started with simple texting and simple calling because we needed to recognize that this device that the nurse is using, she's using for, let's say you're in a med pass. What happens when you get a phone call and you're in a med pass? So we needed to understand the implications of adding this layer of the technology to the workflow, because the nurses in the room know you're supposed to be in your zone of silence because you're giving medications. We had to really honor that process, so we couldn't just go crazy and say, hey, we have the phones for you now, without truly understanding what would happen in terms of that process. Phase 2, what are we hoping to do here, is more of the clinical communications in terms of broadening it to the largest care team, and also, again, making sure that we're texting in terms of collaborating and stuff like that with context. That's what we're in the process of doing now. We have it live at one of our 3 of our inpatient units, and it really has been revolutionary in terms of that workflow for the nursing staff. And again, this has only been implemented for our nurses at this point. I'm going to take you through a case study and you're going to understand some of what I'm talking about. But again, the bottom line is that it's streaming workflow in terms of that of communication. This is kind of our trajectory. at least the way that we see it, and we're collaborating with IT to sort of get here. So again, we started with the basics. What do you need to do from a compliance perspective? Meaningful use was all about barcoding, meaningful use too, and also around your safety initiatives. Because again, this technology started from a patient safety perspective with positive patient identification. We're now sort of going into our phase of nurse productivity. We're planning to do our implementation with sort of more of that bedside documentation, point of care, real time. I'm in here assessing you. I want to be able to sort of capture that. That's the natural next step here. And then finally getting to coordinated care. Huge. Again, we think about why is this so difficult in the acute care setting to communicate? But it really takes a lot of work on the IT side from an infrastructure perspective, and even more importantly, from a workflow perspective by the clinicians. We all have to be on the same sort of platform. Here's the case study that I was referring to earlier. So at our Milstein campus, which happens to be the Columbia, out on the Columbia campus, what do you notice here, or what you notice here when we started doing the calling and the texting is that who is sort of missing from this slide? I kind of gave you the answer already, but we started small with just the folks on the nursing units. So nurses are not sort of calling nurses, and we kind of knew that, right? So if I work with you on the unit, I'm not going to sort of call you unless I can't find you or something like that. But who do the nurses talk to a lot? The unit clerks. And then we also gave it to our technicians, or our patient care technicians. So I can text them easily, say, can you give patient so-and-so water? Can you help me with this patient? That's sort of what we saw in terms of our first phase of communication. And again, the next thing we need to do is really bring in the providers. And that is going to be very challenging. And then what you see here are others. That's sort of external. And so what were they texting about? Most of it, it's actually pretty funny, was really around tasks and questions, and then confirmations back saying, yes, everything is okay. But Cheryl loves this one because she's talking about social supports. So this is some of the analysis that we saw in the text messages, because you can see that. So they were talking to each other or texting each other about things that were important to them as nurse colleagues or as colleagues with the nursing attendant. Who knew that that's really what was going on? We sort of thought of, well, if you're there physically with someone, you're talking. But what we saw was that the messages, or a good number of those messages, contained that sort of information. And here is really where we're going to transition back into giving you an overview of where we are on our road to a single smartphone-based device. So very important. It's about starting with medication administration, specimen collection, the things that we've talked about. We are on the journey of implementing our blood product administration module for this. I think some of you may have this, but it's absolutely, and I almost hate to say this, but it absolutely has to trump other things that we're sort of using this platform for, because we have errors related to the administration of blood to this day. The double checks aren't done, people bypass processes, and because of the outcomes and the improvements we've seen in other areas, we recognize that before we go all gung-ho and crazy with communications and all that stuff, you gotta get the patient safety stuff down first. So that'll be next on the roadmap. And with that, I'm actually gonna turn it back over to Cheryl to take us through these final components.
Okay, you still with us? Still awake?
Fading.
Still awake? I have to throw in a story for you about the why social support is so important to me.
Yeah.
How many of you are nurses or clinicians of some kind?
Yeah.
So I actually went back, I was teaching a few years ago in an associate degree program. Now I'm an old ED nurse, okay? Wasn't big on med surg, but what do you teach when you're teaching in an associate degree program? Med surg, right? So one of my students came up to me one day and said, Cheryl, this is wonderful. I'm going to get to put on a CPM. This was a few years ago. And I went, what's a CPM? I had no clue what it was. So I thought, well, okay, I really need to get myself back to work and actually work again. So I went back and took a per diem staff med-surg job. That's the hardest frippin' job I have done in the last 20 years, I will tell you. But why social support is so important to me is because the biggest emotion I had working was loneliness. We had pushed everything out of the nurse's station. We had pushed everything out. I would literally work a whole 8-hour shift and not see a single colleague unless I was back in line at the automated dispensing cabinet. See, I said it without saying what I normally call it. So to me, it's very, very important. I mean, how social are clinicians, our nurses? We're a very social breed. We need our social interaction. And I'm finding from doing some preliminary analysis of this text messaging that we're actually giving that social support between individuals who aren't seeing each other. And I think that's great. That's my PhD side that says, ooh, another study. I'm so excited. So that's why, to me, social support is kind of one of those unintended consequences that I think is going to be very, very important in the long run. And I want to do some more research on that. So, we got this slide again, because we're going to talk about where we're going now. So what's next in this collaborative journey? But first, before I get to there, I wanted to share some pearls of wisdom. Don't you like my kind of iconic pearl thing here?
Oh, Lordy.
And I've got one to add for you. And this is for your IT people. So all you IT people, look up here at me. You can tell I'm a teacher, right? There was an article my husband threw at me the other day. He's an engineer. He says I think weird. Anyway, he threw me an article and it said, wireless networks are no longer set 'em and forget 'em. They are such now living organisms that need care, they need feeding. 20 years ago, according to this article, you could pretty much set up a wireless network and it'd be fine for ages. Now we're throwing multiple devices, guest networks, and that was one of the things we found working together was what we set up years ago. Over the years kind of drifted off into this morass of multiplicities of devices, and you know, it gets, anybody ever heard about boiling a frog? I'm a Southern girl. You know, you put a frog into boiling water and they jump out, but if you put them in cold water and turn them, you don't notice the subtle changes over the years. We didn't notice the subtle changes over the years of things getting a little bit slower and a little bit slower and a little bit slower until all of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh, it's really slow. So we really are learning a pearl of wisdom that actually isn't up here, is that you've really got to pay close attention to your wireless network, because what might work last year may not be working so well this year. The striving for a single device and a single application. One of my girlfriends had gone to her IT department. She says, okay, here's all the things I need done. Here's all the things I need to have for my nurses. And they went, that's fine, we'll get you 8 different apps. We can do it for you. She said, you're telling me my nurses are going to have to sign on to 8 different apps? And they went, yeah. She said, no, find another solution. Not signing on to 8 different apps. Can't do it. Truly the partnership. In today's world, I think we really have to partner a lot better. And we're partnering with people we never thought about partnering with, like telecommunications companies. Who ever thought healthcare and telecommunication companies would be partnering on anything? But we are. Oh, he did. Yay, you. Working with the EMRs and having that integration is critical. You know, 10 years ago, I would have said, yeah, not happening, but it is happening now. Sometimes with a little prodding and a little begging and maybe a little demanding, but it does happen. Having a mobile device plan, management plan, is really critical from the outset. Not saying you have to go full-blown, you know, buy everything at the beginning, but you need to at least have the plan of, this is where we're going to start, then we're going to go to here, then we're going to go to here. What's going to work on yours? That defined rollout process, they have a very unique rollout process. Other places may be needing a different type of rollout process. And a device replacement plan. One of the things I'm finding in the real world is, for some reason in healthcare, we think once we buy it, we never have to replace it. Have you noticed that? I have a friend of mine, I was at her facility not too long ago. I saw technology still in use that I have not seen since I was in nursing school. That stuff was 30. Remember the intercoms that had the little gold buttons that you push down and to talk to the patients? They are still using them. I'm like, where are you getting parts? And she said, eBay. I'm like, are you joking? She goes, no, they call me eBay for parts. Okay. The reality is, and nobody really thought about this until we got to talking about it about 4 or 5 months ago, that this has really been the world's first full-scale, integrated, mission-critical clinical workflow on commercial-grade, consumer-grade products, and it's worked. Truly, it's ended up wired into the way they do business. I've talked to nurses who said, gotta have it, can't do without it. Obviously, there's an adjustment in the learning curve, as we all know, but what do you want them to learn? How many, 8 apps, 2 apps, 5 apps? What's too much? You really gotta look at that. And we've finally, in this partnership, reached a real enterprise nursing mobility solution. It is phenomenal to see. Truly have streamlined the workflows. We've improved the communication modalities and will continue to. They're pushing us to do things we never thought we would ever have to do. And that's good. Because you guys do like to push, and that's a good thing. I mean, think about how much life has changed even in the past 10 years. Can anybody even remember a time when they didn't even have a phone? Think about it. It really wasn't that long ago when nobody had a phone with them. I still remember my husband actually decided I was going to get a mobile phone. And I'm like, what in the heck would I need a phone for? And he says, well, call me in case of emergencies. What? What emergencies? Well, he got me a data plan and this kind of large, I think it was a Palm Trio. Anybody remember those?
Oh my God.
That was my first phone. He got me that one. 2 days later, I had a flat tire out on the highway, and I went, I love you. You're such a good husband. You do take care of me. The reality is, one of the things that's been really important is to think about how things are designed. Are they designed with the patient and the clinician at the center? Or are we just trying to bolt on things? If you don't understand the clinical workflow and what's important clinically, you're not going to get to the kind of outcomes you want. It has just been a wild and interesting experience. Oh, we got to show your nurses. We got to show your nurses.
Yeah, those are our nurses.
Those, yes, they are real live. This is real live nursing pictures.
Not always smiling, but in this one we got them
Yeah,
smiling.
this time, well, I'm not too sure about the lady on the left.
She's figuring it out.
Oh, she's figuring it out. Okay. The reality is technology is changing so fast. Mm-hmm. And we have to give them mobility tools so that they can work the way they need to work. Mm-hmm. I've been in this industry now. I have been preaching mobility. I can say this, the company isn't in gear anymore, so I can say it if they're not in business anymore. Anybody remember the Motion C5? Anybody remember it? Back 10 years ago? I actually worked for motion computing back then. I have had this vision for 10 years. I've been slogging on this, going, we've got to be able to make it work. The problem is, it was a good computer, crappy wireless, can't run the whole EMR on it. Didn't work very well in that context. But I believe we can together, all working together. Like I said, I never thought I'd be talking to guys in telecommunications companies. And suddenly I am. Why? Because they've got knowledge that we need on how to do things and how to make it right for our clinicians. I don't get to take care of patients anymore. I'm not allowed to because of my own health conditions. They're like, no, 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 you can't go take care of sick people anymore. So my nursing practice is about taking care of the nurses and the other clinicians who are out there taking care of my loved ones and my family. How do I make it better for them? How do we make it better for them? And so, in conclusion, so we can get to questions, we both want to thank you very, very much for the gift of your time today. I know you have lots of things you could do. If you have any questions at all, our contact information is up there, except her Twitter handle is messed up. It should be NY-P Informatics, leave off my part. That was my fault, copy, paste error, sorry. So thank you very much, and if you have any questions, we'd be happy to entertain some. Questions? Come on, guys, don't be shy. Not a one. Yes, thank you. Pardon? What smartphone? Can we say that? Huh? I can answer it. I have to be very careful because this is a continuing education credit. So, and question action, they're using iOS based. Okay? Other questions? I can't believe you can't think of anything for us. Yes, ma'am. So we're using, it's part of the whole platform. So it's one device, one platform, one application is doing everything that we talked about.
Correct.
In her facility. Stand up, dear.
So
it's back up here for you.
No. So I apologize if it wasn't clear, but everything that we're doing in terms of all those modules is through one application. And that's really the beauty of it because our nurses just log into one place. They're then able to text with context, which is super important if you're talking about a patient. You don't need to identify that patient again by room number or name and mistakenly put that in the message because it's with context.
Yes, sir. Ma'am. Can't tell.
It's too hard to...
How do you keep track of your devices?
So this has been very challenging, and I'm sure that's probably why you're asking the question, because it is hard. These devices are small. They can be roaming around the units, and they're costly. So what we've done is we put a process in place from an operational perspective, all different kinds of things, meaning on the units, we had logs. We had check-in, check-out. We had unit clerks asking every nurse every shift, did you put your device back? That's how we tried to manage it. Day one, I will tell you, we lost a good significant amount of devices. They walked, people found they could sell them in pawn shops, and we found that some of our devices did end up there. So now what we've done in the partnership is push our vendor to be like, you gotta help us with something. IT, we need a solution because the job of the nurse and the managers of the units are to think about other things other than where are all of these devices. So thank you for that question.
And as they're adding functionality and it becomes more and more important, they get to be like we are with our smartphones. We can't get too far away from them. So in the beginning when it was one thing, it was a little easier to set it down. It's becoming more and more difficult for them to set it down. Did I see? I'm going to take the back and then I'll come up here to you. Yes, sir, way back there.
Seems like customers, especially after how much they spend on their EMRs, expect this kind of messaging with context to come from those vendors. What do you have to say about that?
So what we've actually done here is kind of unique. Speaking of our EMR vendor, the context and the care team is actually coming from the EMR. We are not sort of setting that on the device or within this particular solution. So we made it a point that from a requirements perspective, we wanted what we were setting in that EMR to be a part of this process and not require duplicate efforts on the part of the staff. And because we had built a custom solution in our EMR, we've actually been able to leverage that in many aspects of our clinical workflow, not just with this solution. So we understood that that was the source of truth, and people were not going to do it somewhere else. So that required a lot of pushing in terms of the vendor, our EMR vendor, sending that information and then receiving it the way we wanted it to. So thank you.
Yes, ma'am?
I have a couple questions. So the first one is, do the nurses share a phone? Do they hand it off at shift change? Do they each get their own phone? How do you manage the battery charging component? And then do you do alarm notification?
Thank you for that question, because one of the things, having 6,000 nurses, was there was no way that we could give one device to one nurse. That's not sustainable, it's not scalable. So what we were able to do here is actually every nurse got sort of their own phone number through Active Directory. And what happens is when you log into the device, it now knows that this is Rosemary and Rosemary is carrying this phone. So we made that a requirement because you're 100% right. There's no way that it can't be a non-shared model. And then the other thing, what was the second part of your question? Oh, yes. So yeah, so nurses needed to remember and the way to charge the phones. And so what we did in terms of looking at how many devices to deploy, the model that we used was if you, let's say, have an ICU unit and the max number of nurses that you can have is, let's say, 10. What we did was we deployed 20 devices. So half would be charging, let's say, on the shift that's off right now, and then half would be carried by the staff. However, those things, they don't do, people are rough on them, so they break the charging component, so you gotta think about replacement parts and those sorts of things, but that was the model that we used. Oh, thank you. Next, I think it's gonna be in the next phase, because right now, when we showed you the picture of the tool belt, our nurses are carrying pagers with alarms. So that's sort of the next phase of what we're doing in terms of the strategy for consolidation. You're 100% right. We're just not there yet.
We have issues where like a bed alarm will go off,
Yep.
and then it like disables the ability to bombing the way you want, because now you're feeling that being thoughtful.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because we'll
And then the device.
we'll
Yes.
note that one.
Yes, ma'am.
What about RTLS? Have you decided to utilize RTLS? Because that would be a great way to follow your staff. And a patient complaint comes in and it says, nobody visited me. Well, you can go back and to the historical information based on the phone use.
We are absolutely looking at RTLS, especially around these processes. Right now, we're primarily using it for equipment tracking. We tag some of our patients. We have a little specialty unit that we sort of pilot our innovations, and that's part of the strategy, knowing that, again, it's gotta be scalable, and knowing that we have challenges in these outside other areas, this unit's looking at that particular solution for us. So thank you for sharing that with us.
There's a lady way over there.
I can't, oh, yes.
You mentioned that you had to partner with telecommunications companies, and that's sort of a new thing. So when you're partnering with a telecommunications provider and also the manufacturer of a cell phone, how are you handling HIPAA compliance?
Can we answer that one?
Yes.
So basically, all transactions are not on the telecommunication provider network. They're in a secured HIPAA server on the client side.
Right.
But we still have to deal with them in helping us make sure that the wireless is where we need it to be, that we're working okay with physicians outside, so we're gonna deal a lot with the physicians. They're gonna have to deal, so we're gonna have to deal with multiple, whoever the physicians have, but they will still be using our application on their cellular network. Does that make sense? And it still all stay HIPAA compliant. Sir, in the back.
How did you decide on the iOS platform, and did you test any other cell phone platforms?
Interesting. That's all. So when we first implemented the solution, it was sort of built on the iOS platform. And remember, when we went through, I don't know if you wanted to answer this a little differently, but when we transitioned over from the old sort of company to this company, it was built on that vendor solution, so we sort of naturally just happened to fall into it. I don't know if you wanted to answer it differently.
Yeah, I was going to say, basically, you've never had, I mean, there's certainly been other people who've looked at multiple solutions.
Yeah.
In this particular case study, no. They just kind of kept
Went with
going
that.
with what they had. It was working. Yes, ma'am.
For the barcoding piece, do you use sleds on the iOS device?
Yeah.
Or how do they do the barcoding?
Yeah, that's exactly how they do it.
Although
So they
we're
have-
starting to test the soft scan now.
Very nice.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
so you heard our calls about these things are too big to carry around.
Right,
So
exactly. They're big and chunky, and that's what
day one, the minute you showed that device to these nurses, they were like, "Are you kidding me?"
Or at least some of them, not all of them.
A lot of them. So you're 100% right.
Yeah.
Right
So-
now, it is that look. That's right. It is.
It is a sled,
Yeah.
and now we're starting to pilot the softwares.
just regular barcoding
Yeah,
with the camera.
with the camera. What do they call it? Image
Yeah.
image capture. Sorry, couldn't remember the name of it.
Yes. Oh. You guys are getting all of the.
Man, they're going to ask us everyone in the book, aren't they?
Yes.
Love it, love it.
So obviously that was super important, especially that we partnered with our infection and prevention and control department when we first started deploying these. We needed to understand what products we could use to sort of wipe these devices down, because obviously you're going from room to room. So it was a key component of the training of these nurses for them to understand, like every other piece of equipment in this hospital, you gotta be careful about sanitizing it, but they are, we could use our standard products. We didn't need to purchase anything that we didn't already have within the hospital to clean these.
Yes, ma'am.
What about wireless in the hospital? Do you have any problems with Wi-Fi?
My other favorite topic. I've said Wi-Fi like every day for the past, 2 years. We had challenges. I'm not gonna, I'll be transparent. Yes, there were areas within our hospital. Some are, newer buildings. Some are older buildings. We had particular rooms that we couldn't scan, or there was poor service. So you're 100% right. We had to do multiple assessments, or at least the IT team did, of the Wi-Fi, looking at different sort of aspects of what could be causing these challenges. But at the end of the day, the way that we explained it was, this is so important, because what if it's your family member in this room? What are you going to tell this poor patient? I'm sorry, you're in the unlucky Wi-Fi room. You have to give them the ability to scan. So have we pushed and pushed our IT team and our vendors? Yes, because sometimes it was just getting stuck and the nurse really was sort of out of luck.
And like I said earlier, I think the most important thing is to remember wireless is now a living entity.
Yeah.
You've got, it requires almost constant monitoring and making sure that it's staying at acceptable service levels, and if it's not, then need to look at why. And we have about time for one more question. Anybody else have one more for us? Absolutely. Except remember her, whoops. What?
What? This one?
I pushed previous.
Oh, maybe it shut us down. We can get it to you. Actually, we have our cards, or we can take
Yeah.
yours. Everyone,
Thank you
very
very
much.
much.
Enjoy your
We hope you enjoyed
cocktails.
it.